Marlene.
Here.
Andrew E. And Ryan.
Here.
I'm here. And David, not to forget you.
Present.
You. And then we've got Brad online.
I'm here.
And I don't know if anybody has sent in any messages about excused absences, or maybe we catch up with those later.
Sure. I know Zach is excused.
Okay.
Other than that, don't believe I've heard from anyone else. Oh, and Katie.
Excused.
Yeah.
Did you just say Andrew also before a minute ago? No. Okay, that was Zach. All right. And then, one moment. We have a quorum, having Ryan step in as an alternate. And then I guess the next thing is, have everybody had a chance to review the minutes from 2 months ago? All remembered everything about it. Any corrections or edits anyone wants? Okay, with no corrections, then I'll approve the minutes. And it looks like we have at least one person here for public comment, correct?
Yeah, but can I move that till after the dog park presentation?
Sure. I'll think I
All right, thank you.
get the connection. Okay, then probably a good time to have an introduction here. Oh,
Sorry, I just want to make one note. I'm noting that Brenda is here, and then also we have a virtual guest. Just wanted to let the guests know, would you like to make public comment in any way? You may do so or not.
Hi, Steve. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Sorry, I'm kind of multitasking here from the conference room in the library, which is a good place to hang out.
Nice. Would you like to give audience comment?
Yes, please.
Please introduce yourself and go right ahead. Try to keep it to 5 minutes, please.
I don't know if we did the minutes first. I didn't want to cut in ahead of time, so.
Oh, yeah, we just finished that.
Okay, so my name's Steve Pereira. I've lived in the Old Town area of Issaquah for about the past 16 years. First of all, several thoughts, and I'll try to be fairly brief in them so you can continue your good work. The first is thanks to each of you. I always like to say for serving and giving back to Issaquah, the place we live and love. So thank you. It's a sincere thank you to each of you for serving. The second is just a thought. I know that there's a Issaquah program where you can donate a bench and have that put up. I would like to see or ask the idea of if it's possible to donate a place where you can secure your bike or a bike rack type thing program within Issaquah. So just throwing the question out there for consideration. Third question or issue was the dog park. I admit I've always been a strong opponent of the dog parks. I just don't think it's the best use of Issaquah dollars at this time. That said, I still have concerns about the report where it talks about whether or not it's wildlife or water area. I would think that I'd like to push back on that. I also would like to hear some feedback from the park board on the idea. I've heard comments talked about where maybe Issaquah needs more than one dog park, and this dog park doesn't seem to meet the size definition or size requirements. Why we're expanding the scope to have multiple dog parks. I'd like to hear the Parks Board kind of push back on that idea of having even just one, let alone multiple dog parks. That seems to be not a good use of limited dollars for care for pets. The last issue I wanted to talk about in my fine monotone voice, thanks for all for your perseverance, was the idea that I sent an email with an editorial in the Seattle Times from August 2023 about what are called culturally modified trees, which are trees marked by First Peoples, including the Sammamish tribe. I think that Issaquah Parks has several issues that are worked towards that. One is the Heritage Tree Program, which I would like to see defined as a program that protects and defines all trees, not just that it landmarks them, but it has code language that prevents their removal if they are found. The second is Title 18, where it talks about having that in our code, but I think we need things beyond that I would like to see the Issaquah Parks Board advocate for. One is what is the city's SEPA or State Environmental Protection Agency or Act for protecting trees? What can Issaquah do to lobby for that change and modification to include culturally modified trees? What can we do to lobby at the state level and at other jurisdiction levels? And how do we put that into our own code language so that a heritage tree or a culturally modified tree does not get removed? I think that's beyond the park board's scope of the Title 18. So I'd like to see language that we work with other bodies, whether that's Development Commission, whether that's other staff groups, to advocate for those things and those changes. I think that kind of, so I've talked about the lobbying at the state level, and I think about a wider scope of our own jurisdiction, not just the things that the park board is looking in, but I want to see how the park board work ties in with the environmental board, within the development commission, within the planning policy commission, to better flesh out and scope out this culturally modified trees to make sure it's something that we're taking full action. I think that's kind of in keeping with the existing heritage and tradition within things that Issaquah residents would already support, but I would like to see those as defined work plan items, and I don't think those are currently fleshed out as much as well as they should be. That concludes it for me. Again, thank you all for your time and your dedication and your efforts, and I'll go back to mute, and I'll probably close my camera too. Thank you.
Got Andrew Myers here too. To step in. Okay. Well, with that, we're going to move into regular business. And on the agenda, the first item is the park system plan update. Oh, and sorry, I want to do an introduction.
It's all right. No, thank you. I'll do a bit of both. Thank you so much. So before jumping into the park plan update, I want to take the opportunity to introduce Robin Spears, our new park planning and development manager. Robin started September 1st. Boy, hard to believe. It's one month in almost. So fortunate to have Robin. We had a really strong recruitment process through the summer. Robin comes with just a great, as a landscape architect, both private and public experience. Spent some time working in some other big cities down in the California area, as well as doing some consultant landscape architect work. So seeing sort of parks and city park system and city park development, both from the private sort of perspective as well as the public perspective. So just thrilled to have Robin here. I don't know if you want to say a few words and say hi, or yeah.
No, it's really exciting to be here. It's a really great time, and knowing that we're doing the park plan system, the system update. Usually I am on the other side looking at those, interpreting those, but to be able to develop that with the community, I think is really special, and it's a great way to just jump in and get to know Issaquah, get to know the community, and get to know the system. Thank you.
So yeah, exciting to have Robin here. Thank you for letting me give that introduction. On another note, we have been recruiting for the senior park planner position. So the position that Jen Fink held, that position, we have 2 candidate interviews later this week, 2 really strong candidates there. So continue to progress and staff ourselves and position ourselves to get a lot of this work, really important work in the park system done. So exciting. So with that, park system plan updates. You want to share screen or something? Thank you so much. So you may recall, a number of you were here at the time, but in 2017, we did a big community outreach effort that created the city's first sort of system-wide park plan. adopted in 2018. As my copy, it's a little tethered, but it's really important work. And we're asked by the state Recreation and Conservation Office in order for us to be eligible for a wide variety of grants. They ask, and it's really best practice for the cities to update those plans every 6 years. So here we are, 2023. We kicked off this effort in the summer. I think we had a chance to update all of you. We are working with a firm, Design Workshop. They've done a lot of park system plans for some very large and small, very active quality of life communities, from Vancouver, BC to Salt Lake City to Aspen, Colorado, and Boulder, Colorado, and cities of many shapes and sizes in between that. So we really feel like it's a good fit. We've done some focus group conversations within the community. Tonight, we really want to have a chance to start to dive in. If you want to go to the next slide, Asante, and really start doing some of the framework discussions with all of you tonight. We're not asking for any action tonight, but over the next couple of months, tonight focusing on park classifications, and then October and actually into November, focusing on the goals and policies within the park system plan. Both of these are really, really important efforts that start to create the building blocks. In the meantime, we have some community outreach, continued community outreach, and some survey work that's going to be going out in October. That's going to help us get a sense of really sort of the aspirational goals that the community has. Much like this prior plan, as we go through plan development, we will have a second public outreach sometime later into first quarter, second quarter of next year, where we'll really be getting into specific sort of priorities, project priorities, et cetera, after we do some of this initial work. All to say, this is really important work, and sometimes it can get lost. Why do a system plan? Does it really help? Is it just a document that sits on a shelf? I can tell you it's not. And even to the point when you look at some of our conversations tonight, the projects that we're talking that have been on our work plan, the ARPA projects, the ARPA funded projects that, through a pandemic, the city got federal funding. We were able to work as a board and staff. Council asked us to prioritize opportunities. Those opportunities came right out of the system plan and some of the planning work that was going on. A lot of really, really important work around the importance of urban forestry, initiating a green Issaquah program. Those were all operational priorities that came out of this document. And so I want to give those of you that were here at the time some real applause, and just recognize that done well and really done in a community-minded way, this work really helps to drive priorities and drive work. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Robin to talk through classifications and sort of why are classifications in our park system important.
Okay. So when we first start looking at a plan, you kind of have to establish a baseline of what type of parks you have in your plan. And they kind of become the core of everything around it. When we're looking at classifications, we want to ask ourselves, what are classifications and why do we need them? They allow jurisdictions to identify different types of parks. And obviously, we do have several different types of parks that we really want to start refining and aligning with kind of national standards. So we have a baseline to compare ourselves with. We look at the similarities across a number of characteristics throughout the system, and typically they're driven by park use, purpose, and size. But why are they really important? I think classifications really establish that language for our park system and what we want that park system to do, how we want it to perform. We're looking at different locations, programming, and uses of different park types, because each park serves a different kind of purpose for the community. It can help in assessing and promoting connectivity, acquisitions, and just the overall condition or level of service of the parks. And then why do we need to update them? Well, we established our initial park classification in 2018, but as most of these are, they're very dynamic and they change with the times. We need to change with the times. We're looking at what available land. We are a little bit land constrained, so we want to see what's left that we can acquire for the system, acquire for our needs. And just the community has become more dynamic and the needs definitely change throughout the years.
Can I touch on one thing too, Robin?
Yeah.
Great overview. We did a lot of work in the 2018 plan. One thing we didn't really do was take this deep dive into the classifications. We really took the classification definitions and the approach that the city took for a number of years. And I guess I would say that, and as Robin sort of goes into the specifics, I hope you'll start to see, and we've got some core questions. I think it's time that we really look at them deeply, and are they really helping define our system and the function of our system, or aren't they? And in some cases, I think as we look at the priorities of connectivity that this community has, the reality that we have a number of our park parcels that are much more linear in form and function than they are as sort of more of a dot, more of a community park and neighborhood park. We really think it's important to make sure we have classifications that help really clearly portray what our system, how our system functions.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Definitely. So here are our current classifications, and I'll let you all read through those, but what we wanted to do is the pieces and the parts that are in red are really what we want to dive into and discuss today, and see if they really make sense with this national standards, make sense for our system, and make sense moving forward. So for community parks, we're realizing that what we have right now is ranging from 1 to 50 acres, but does that 1 acre really provide enough amenities for a community park? So that's one thing we want to see if we want to increase and start.
And that wouldn't be typical. I mean, if you were to look at a national standard, if you were to look at the cities around us, most cities will define a community park as 20 acres or larger or 10 acres or larger. So again, just some of those, some of these really important checks. Yeah.
Right. Then next up is neighborhood parks, which are typically smaller in size than community parks. And those really range from 1 to 5 acres or less than 5 acres. Resource parks, I want to point out resource. We highlighted that because we've been talking back and forth. Is that really an appropriate name for that? Resource could apply many different things. So we kind of want to straighten that out, tighten that up. And then in resource parks, right now we have these resource parks are generally more passive, including items such as trails and interpretive signage. But that also conflicts with some of the other classifications. So we just want to narrow that down and keep redefining that. Natural open space, kind of self-explanatory. Open space. And undeveloped parks, again, property that has not yet been funded or developed as parkland, but is in line to be developed in the future. Facilities, obviously a building that has public use for gathering spaces. And then we did have urban and natural trails, but we want to pull trails out of the park classifications altogether and start aligning with what Public Works has.
So we'd still have trail classifications, but having trail classifications fit within park classification, they're two different things. A trail is an amenity within the system. Park classifications usually have to do with the land itself, the parcel itself.
All right, so with the new classifications, we really want to develop criteria that we are assessing to make sure we're assessing each one similarly. We're looking at acreage, active or passive use, amenities, access is very important, landscape and the environment, and the stewardship of our natural or open space. And how does that park classification fit within the Green Necklace network? So we're starting to look at new language, and the blue text is really what we want to kind of focus on and open that up for discussion. Again, we were talking community parks are generally larger in acreage. So we're thinking they'll be ranging from 5 to 50 acres and 10 to 50 acres, sorry, 10 to 50 acres, centrally located for multiple neighborhoods. And I think that's really important to know that this is actually servicing not one neighborhood, but can service multiples. Community parks are kind of the best of all worlds, where various active and passive uses. And we're saying with approximately a third of that land reserved for active recreation use. So that'll help us balance priorities, amenities, and what we want to put in these community parks. For neighborhood parks, we're kind of keeping the same range of acreage, 1 to 5 acres, but these are designed to serve the needs of basically one neighborhood. So again, much smaller, not as many amenities, but applicable to that specific neighborhood. And then we're saying, or recommending that with approximately a quarter of that land reserved for active recreation use. Nature parks, or resource parks, we thought would be better served as, or defined as, nature parks that could range from 1 to 50 acres. So that's very flexible depending on the location of the park. And really, the primary focus is on preserving forested areas and supporting wildlife and habitat conservation. Again, this could actually be located anywhere, so we really like that flexibility. Needs a strong connection to an urban or natural trail, which we kind of see throughout the park system right now, and provide links to other natural spaces. Limited active recreation use, focused on passive recreation. So this wouldn't be a highly active park. And then open space, again, 1 to 50 acres, just aligning with the available plan that we know we're going to have or have right now. It's basically native ground is to remain relatively undeveloped for wildlife and habitat preservation, with a primary focus on passive recreation with trails. No active recreation development at all. Then we have undeveloped parks, 1 to 50 acres. So undeveloped could be located in natural or commercial areas and held until activated. And the important thing for this is we may need to still stabilize some of these sites depending on the condition that they're in. So there might be some activity, it just wouldn't be developed.
Another important distinction would be, thanks, Robin, great overview. An undeveloped park has an intention of being developed someday, right? So it might, in some cases, an undeveloped park may look a lot like a nature park or look a lot like open space in its current state. It's just that it has a plan to become something else.
Mm-hmm.
So an undeveloped park would be a classification that, think of it this, it wouldn't be a permanent classification for that parcel. It's living that classification until it becomes something else.
I think what would be helpful is, instead of doing it like we set the criteria and then we try to fit the parks in, it would be good to see what parks fall into each one of the criteria to make sure that the criteria are correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to say 10 acres and all of a sudden, I don't know, for example, like Tibbetts is less than 10 acres. Like, oh no, it's definitely this kind of park. So I think if we could send that out and be like, this is an example of the parks that would fall in.
Yeah, no, it's great, Dave. And we've done some of that cursory work. I think discussion around this idea, do we want to tinker with the classifications? Are we headed the right direction? And you're right, a next step would be coming back with, okay, here's what our roster of parks looks like. And here's how, quite frankly, how our acreage adjusts, and in many ways, how our acreage is functioning.
Mm-hmm. And then the blues are 2 new classifications that we're proposing. The greenways, which I'm sure it's kind of a little bit of a buzzword, but you hear that quite often. We're interpreting that as it could range from 20 to 30 feet wide at quarter mile or longer. And again, these are just ideas to throw out there. It could be less, it could be more. But basically it could be located in natural commercial areas, serving multiple neighborhoods. But the primary focus is really supporting ecological restoration around that trail and preserving that landscape. It could be used for trails, but we're recognizing we still need to keep that property open for flood zones and stormwater control measures, which you're seeing more and more parks and landscapes being integrated in, so they serve multiple functions. And then linear parks could range from 30 to 50 feet wide. We find that that's a good width. Any smaller than that, and it almost becomes, it's really difficult to fit recreation. Right. Yeah. And we're thinking that really, there's an emphasis on more urban or commercial environments, and primarily accessed by sidewalks or another trail, urban trail system, with a primary focus on active uses, secondary and passive uses. So we're going to see with development coming in a lot more linear parks. They still function really well. They still provide quite a few amenities. They're just very long and narrow. It's not what you typically think of a park, but we can see that trend starting to happen there.
Again, with the goals of connectivity, we think having two classifications that are more linear in nature will really serve an important role in how some of our parcels are functioning. Again, really good overview. Maybe a relatively simple way to think of the difference between a greenway and a linear park is both are a linear parcel, have a linear look. What is the primary function? In the case, the greenway's primary function is likely ecological, but there's a recreational use, right? It's multiple benefit, but primarily ecological. Recreation is secondary. A linear park is sort of flipped. Linear park has primarily a recreational benefit, but it could also have some ecological benefit. So it's just it's thinking sort of that primary secondary relationship of the multiple benefits.
Right. And just so, sorry, Chris.
It may not really matter, but especially if you do apply something like what David mentioned, but like there are some gaps like in the numbers, like go 1 to 5 and then 10. And you may just find out that we don't have any, or we need a place to put the 7.5 acre or whatever, or throw in a lot of approximates. And then for the greenway, so would the green necklace be a greenway?
Green necklace could be I think the green necklace is not a singular thing. The green necklace is probably going to have some park classifications, but it's probably going to have some linear parks. It's also going to have some greenways. I think these prescient photos that Robin provided are a good example. I would say just within our system, the Rainier Trail is a parcel that it really functions a lot in many places as a linear park. In some places it functions as a greenway though, as well. The recently acquired parcel that's again linear in nature, that's part of I was referred to it as the Gateway Apartments. It's now Anthology Apartments off of Newport, right? That the boardwalk, and then there's a parcel that again is relatively linear in nature. Not really a community park. Is it really a neighborhood park? It could be more of a linear park. So just wanting to give ourselves that kind of adaptability. I think you've got a couple of photos there of both.
Of both, yeah, Rainier and then, the wetland area and the boardwalk over by that. Just to give you ideas of what that can look like. Okay, and then looking at trail classifications, again, we're going to separate that out from the park classifications. But with the comprehensive plan coming out, we wanted to make sure we're better aligned with that language as well. And there is a confusion there going back and forth. So really our urban trail, according to the Muni Code, is a multi-purpose trail. We're looking at natural trails more as a forest path or a neighborhood trail. So we want to start moving that language and aligning that a little bit better.
So our thoughts tonight, just as we move forward with this, on this in particular, as Robin said, is still having trail classifications, but letting them live as their own, not embedded within park classifications, and then really taking a look at the new Title 18, the new development code, and making sure what we're classifying in our definitions of trails, trying to have some consistency across all these planning documents and code. So a little bit of cleaning up. Take it away.
I'll take this one. Yeah, this is what I was working on this week, actually. So coming out in the next few weeks is going to be our first online survey for the park system update. We're looking at our goals with the community that we want to assessing the existing system. What do we have right now? What are people using right now? Assess what is missing in the system. Again, we have dynamic communities that are always changing, and we want to make sure that we're providing the amenities that families need. What are the future priorities? What do people think that we need to really focus on? Is a system accessible and equitable? This is a big thing that I really like to look at, is in making sure our system is accessible for all ages. We say if a child from 8 and a person from 8 to 80 can utilize the space, then that's a successful design. So that's what we're going to shoot for. And then, are we being environmental stewards? With the new code comes new buffer, comes new conservation areas. So let's make sure that as we're developing, we're actually protecting at the same time and balancing those amenities. Survey timeline. The first survey is going to open late September. We're doing a translation right now. So that may take an extra week, but we want to make sure, again, we're reaching out to as many people as we can. And that will close between the 13th and the 18th. And then we're going to have QR codes and flyers at parks and community events. We're going to try for Salmon Days, but if not, we'll make sure that we focus on other events and get it out to as many people as we can.
Yeah, really broad broadcast of information to many email distributions. Also utilizing some of our successful outreach efforts these last couple of years. We'll have some yard signs with the QR codes strewn throughout our parks and our trail system, really inviting residents to pop right on and take the survey. So. Want me to take this one? All right. I would gladly. I love the tag team. So just teeing up, we've got a couple questions and really want to have some discussion about the classifications. But before that, just a little bit of a look ahead. You might remember, I think I'm looking at Brad Book online. Brad and Chris, I think we're both part of a subgroup that took a look at goals and policies sort of towards the end of the 2018 plan. We want to dust those off again and take an early look. How do they fit? How do they align? Have a conversation around goals and policies in October, and then come back based on that conversation and communication. See if we can firm things up in November and have some recommendations. That's an important date. We'd love to hit that date, and that, as Robin said earlier, the comprehensive plan is getting updated at the same time we're doing our park plan update. So it would be great to have our goals and policies serve as foundational for our park plan update, but then it will also go on a parallel path along with the other sections of the comprehensive plan, goals and policies, as it navigates that adoption process. So great timing for that discussion, not only, again, informing our plan, but really aligning really well with the comprehensive plan as well. So yeah, I'd love to open it up for a conversation. Here's some questions more as prompts. If you've got questions, we can bounce back to the classifications, but would love your thoughts on what could end up being a pretty significant change with the community park definition. But I think it's important we do it. So would love some thoughts around that, and then any thoughts or questions you might have around these classifications that are more linear in nature. And then did we miss anything? I see Brad's hand is up.
Do I get to talk? Okay. I like the additions. I like the clarifications. Just a couple things that I would want to point out. Much like Chris mentioned, I think the 5 to 10 acre gap is something that needs to be looked at a little further, not only when we start fitting in our existing parks, but just keep in mind of future acquisitions, that's also going to be an issue. I mean, we might run across some 7 or 8 acre parcel at some point to turn into a park, and it's not going to fall within either of these classifications the way it's written. So something needs to be done with that gap. And I guess I'll leave it up to you what that best thing would be. I would drop the community maybe down to 5 instead of 10 as a solution to that. But as you pointed out, Jeff, maybe that's just too minimal amount of acreage for a community park, given all the other areas. One thing that I've been an advocate of for some time is public art and interpretive signage. We have a lot of educational opportunities in our park system, and interpretive signage is a good way of accomplishing that education. There isn't really anything in these classifications about public art, and I think this is a good time to start that discussion about where public art should be within our park system. I mean, I think that Jacob, Two Trees is a perfect, in my opinion, the best thing that the city has produced in terms of public art in a very long time. And here it is in a linear park along Rainier Trail. So I think we need to talk more about that in terms of where it's appropriate to put public art and interpretive signage. The only language on interpretive signage that I saw is in the new language of, even that might be missing in nature parks. It was in the resource park language before. And so we need to include that somewhere. And I would be more broad in scope of that, because even some of our community parks and neighborhood parks, I could see potential for public art and interpretive signage. You know, I look at Veterans Memorial as a perfect example of the amount of history that's involved in that park. At some point, public art and interpretive signage might be appropriate to that park. And so you don't want to necessarily just restrict that to linear parks or greenway. And so I would be an advocate to include it in community parks, and also maybe even neighborhood parks, or really all of them classifications. I could see the potential for it. And I think that covers my main points. Thanks.
Great point, Brad. Thank you. Just to add your comment on public art, really good as we think of classifications, but also I think an important thing to think about as we talk goals and policies. And are our goals and policies speaking to that desire, intent, interest? If that is a collective interest, which I think it is. Are we taking the opportunities for storytelling through both public art and interpretive signs for these park spaces? So really good. Thanks for that. Your thought on community parks and neighborhood parks, agreed, and both Chris and David brought it up as well. Yeah, I think Rob and I can take a look and again sort of see what what are best practices amongst some of our neighboring jurisdictions. What are some best practices of jurisdictions of our same size? Again, we're an immensely constrained city. We have an immensely constrained park system. Yeah, we'll try and be really smart with and bring something back to you all. And some of you saw my hand gestures. We might even think of something as creative as, a community park acreage size and a neighborhood park acreage size don't have to meet in one place. There could actually be a little bit of overlap, and let the function of it's not just always the acreage, but the function, the proximity, the geography of that park could also play in. So we'll, again, look at some best practices and try and give us ample flexibility and clarity at the same time.
I have a couple things.
Yeah.
So echoing David's comment about examples of which parks fit in what classification, because as a city kid, I don't totally have a great notion of like how big is 10 acres and which parks fall into that classification versus not. And so it's helpful to have some point of reference of, okay, does it functionally make sense? If this is what a commuting park is, this is which parks would fall into that category. And then I was curious about there was some description in there about 1/3 or 1/4 of the park being dedicated for active recreational activities, I think it's called. And wondering if that was, like, how strict that is, like if it's, could it be more and should it be more, or should it be less, or is it flexible? Like, is it basically a guideline or a prescription in terms of how we think about the actual way that the parks are used? And then, sorry, the last one was the trails piece, and you were kind of explaining this, Jeff, but I didn't quite follow in terms of how from the old or existing classification, the new classification, what the implications are for how we think about trails. And are trails essentially now greenways and linear parks, or is trails something totally different? And so if we just use a little bit more clarity on how that pans out in the new system.
Yeah. Really good. Maybe the last one first. In terms of, I think the thought of trails and connectivity are really, really important in this community. A park classification is meant to be a way of defining, describing, categorizing parcels of land. So the classification goes with the land, not with the amenity. A trail is a really important amenity within a park, right? And so we think trail classifications are just as important and just as critical. I think as we're looking at connectivity, we might be able, where we're connecting with land and have either ownership or a classification that becomes a greenway, right? So the park classification is classifying the land itself. There could be a trail in that greenway, right? But in some cases, we might have trails that are just a trail and don't necessarily have the land ownership or a swath of land or a parcel of land that we own underneath.
They would fall outside of the classification.
They would fall outside the park classification, but they would be classified as a trail, right? What's the trail goal that we have? Or let's say, so many of our wilderness trails are on a park that's classified as open space, and we also have the trail, right? So in many cases, they live together. It's just a way of making sure we're not trying to classify really important amenities. We're not trying to classify them as a park classification themselves. I hope I'm not making that too confusing. Your second question had to do with
the active activities.
The scalability. And please jump in, Robin. I'll take my first shot at it. That idea of at least 1/3 is active, or at least a portion of it is active. It's not meant to be a prescribed amount. Super flexible there. And I think it's meant to read as at least that percentage of it is active. A higher percentage of it could be active, but I think within those classifications, community park and neighborhood park, and as you look at all of those really are the two classifications that denote active developed parkland, right? That, and I think we're trying to say in that classification, there's an intentional development. This is meant to be a developed park, to be a community park or a neighborhood park. But it also doesn't mean 100% of it needs to be, right? In many cases, there are neighborhood parks that have those active amenities, but can still look and feel very much like a, forested space. Hillside Park's probably a great example, right?
Right.
That's a neighborhood park, but we're not saying as a neighborhood park, it needs to somehow look and feel like because that neighborhood doesn't want a highly developed park. So it's meant to just function more as hey, there's a degree of, there's an intentionality that it's actively developed, that it's developed, but it doesn't entirely have to be developed.
Is it active like a field that you can reserve for a sports event, or is it like a playground that's?
Active, active and, well, developed in terms of, it's a ball field, it's an irrigated lawn, it's a playground, it's picnic shelters, it's, Tibbetts Valley Park versus Harvey Manning Park, Bergsma, right? Bergsma's not going to be a community park or a neighborhood park. It's really meant to be a corridor up into the foothills. So really good. And again, these weren't efforts at trying to create descriptions. I think, and just hearing this discussion, I think a next step for Robin and I is to really say, all right, let's take these classifications, let's start to prescribe our parkland to it, so we can sort of see proportionally how does it play out, and then take a little bit more Issaquah-centric attempt at the descriptions. So describing them, so they're really describing Issaquah system. It's not sort of just a generic description.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that could be helpful, especially for community parks, is having a dimension of people that flow through it. So it's not just, it's 50 acres, it's a community park. It's also, I would argue, pedestrian park is a community park. It's small, it's less than an acre, but thousands of people walk through it like every month, right? So having that dimension would help too.
They're really good in terms of use.
Yeah,
in terms
in
of
terms
sort
of
of
use.
intensity of use. Yeah. You bring up a great point, David, and I guess I'll tease up, as we look at how do our parks function, there's a collective classification. When you look pedestrian park, depot park, Veterans Memorial Field, the senior center, right? Those in their collection function as a community park.
Right, okay.
Right? To get to the very thing you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I think apart from having a point of reference on what the current parts are, it will be good to know as well your plans for allocating the percentage of development for each classification. It's not fully clear with the comparison if you're changing any allocation of development for each park classification. So it will be, I think, helpful to know that as well. It also, each classification also doesn't have, every classification are all above 1 acre. So I'm curious if it has been considered that smaller parks can exist too, and if that's a classification that warrants being considered as well. And I think also the additional classifications like greenways and linear paths, I think it will be helpful because you talked about updating your park goals. How do the additional classifications tie to the goals of the city? Are you planning for 80% of the city to have access to greenways or linear paths? Those things.
Really good. So in some ways, how does this work with classifications? The foundational work of the classifications also mesh with the foundational work of the goals and policies. It's really good.
Got a couple. On the trail classifications, I don't know if you can pull that one up. 22 to 66. That one. So the code with the new adopted code is switching from urban trail term to multipurpose trail.
Urban trail was our initial term, original term. Yeah. And then the code has multi-purpose trail now.
Okay. And that seems fine, but I think the switch from natural trails to forest path, I know it's maybe not something we can change from here, but it seems almost more restrictive. You know, we might have all kinds of different paths that aren't all forested. You know, it seems like they made a mistake there and in, you know, limiting that way. So something we may have to think about as we try to fit, but know that we can't perfectly fit that.
Yeah, no, really good. Yeah, the table on the left represents, and that's pulled out of the new code again. And, but you're right, Chris. I mean, to the point that as we try and align with it, if we need to make sure we're still clearly defining and classifying the types of trails we have within our city system, we need to make sure we're doing that. Is what you're saying that.
Or just give them the Post-it note for the next time.
Yeah, and say, hey,
Exactly,
hey,
Maybe not the
Here's
best.
what
yeah,
else we
Yeah.
got.
yeah.
But you know, another comment more, you know, that was just focused on 2 words. I think overall, the idea of, you know, updating our trail classification, or our park classifications is valuable. And I think what has been brought up about use and, you know, how many users are visiting and then how many people have access to it. I don't even know exactly how you would do this, but maybe if there's a possible way to examine, you know, currently we are 80% of the parks fall into this, or 20 or this, and 30 or that, and 5 or this, or whatever. And then just maybe look at like what our next projects are that are actual, you know, on the capital improvements plan. Say this would kind of push us in these directions and maybe look at things, evaluate that way. Is that really the direction we want to go?
Yeah, how are we almost proportionally investing across these classifications is what I.
And some, you know, some things like, you know, city council's decisions about how to spend the ARPA money might affect that.
Yeah, really good.
Anyone else?
Great feedback.
Guys have anything else?
Really helpful. Thank you all.
Okay. That, we will move to our next item of business. I'll,
The next item is dog park. So Asante, and I'd be remiss as I introduce Robin, and yes, we're so excited to have Robin here. I just want to give a big thank you to Asante and to Rick Still, our park operations manager. Both Asante and Rick have been instrumental this summer as we've continued a lot of this work. Moving forward in terms of design projects, Asante will continue to play a pretty key role in these park projects as Robin's coming on board, and she lends support to the whole department. And one of those is the dog park. So I'll let you guys take it away.
Yeah. Dog park, sure. The Rainier Trail Dog Park, we've had a couple of conversations with our consultant, updating based on both our discussion here at the park board and some of the other public comments that have come through. And we just want to sort of go through our current status, what has changed and updated within the conceptual plan, and then talk through our next steps.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about sort of the recent updates, I guess, for the revised conceptual plan, or is that next? Okay, all right. So basically, based on our conversation from the first conceptual plan, we have some updates that were shared at the park tour, I believe, that the few of you that were able to join us for that. So we just wanted to share that with the larger board. And then talk about the surveying and permitting that has already happened on that area, and some next steps with that. We've talked about this and it was included in your agenda packet, the Watershed Company Wetland Delineation Report from 2020 for that area. And then at the end, we will go through the right-of-way vacation process that we are working on. That is also part of this park. And we'll go through our permitting. So this is the concept that you all saw originally and gave us lots of really great, awesome feedback. We also had our open house at the dog park and got some good feedback about the features that make sense, the things that maybe don't. What we heard is that we do want to keep the 2 entry and exit gates. So one at the front end of the park and then one over at the side of the trail for folks to enter and leave from that side of Rainier Trail. That the surfacing will likely be bark surfacing, that shade structures will be included. So thank you. I know Marlene, you talked about that last meeting as well. And there was consensus that keeping a small shy dog area within the park would be added at first, with the flexibility that if that use doesn't warrant keeping that space, that there's the opportunity to change that to a larger dog run based on use. And that we will have water stations, but not the dog washing station. So all things that we talked about last time. Here's some more features of the options for the features that may go into the park. We are still looking at dog water fountain options that allow for less clogging in that bottom area, because that was also feedback that we got. Lots of kids and dogs themselves like to put bark in that area, and we don't want that to clog, and so we're looking at different options for that. We will be going with wood fencing and the mulch in the main area, and then this is one of the a similar structure for one of the shade structures that will be included. There's another picture missing. But with those changes that we talked about for this plan, is there anything else that we feel is missing from the concept? Maybe I'm gonna skip this first question until we get to the end of it. But just wanted to make note that we do already have 2 memorial benches that have been donated for this area. So there will definitely be at least 2 benches within the dog park. There is an option here to ask if there are any other additional memorial or dedication programs within the dog park that we would like to have as an option. And so I'm going to
While you're doing that, is something, maybe I can talk next steps as well, and then we can really just open it up for discussion. I know there's audience comment. Yeah.
Just real quick, if you could maybe give us a reminder about schedule and requirements for this as well.
Yeah, and our next steps. Yeah.
I'm going to pass out a couple copies of the updated conceptual plan. Thought it was in this presentation.
I think it's up, I think.
Is it? Just put it up. I'll go back.
It's a little bit different graphic, but it's very, very similar.
Oh, maybe this
To
is
the-
the older one.
Yeah.
It's the May.
Is
Is that one different?
It's different
That's the
than
older
that.
one.
Yes, that's
Okay.
the older one.
Okay.
Sorry, there should be another one.
So in terms of next steps, and again, yeah, open to discussion. I know, Chris, you want to open it up for audience comment. So as we're now sort of at this point of really being ready to finalize design, one of the things that the new code allows us to do and that we want to do, as we've been talking with community planning and development is we want to do and plan to do a technical document review. The new code allows us to do this. You notice in the agenda packet, we included the wetland report that Watershed Company did for us as part of this project, dog park project. The technical document review really lets us work with community planning and development and really ask them to review all the critical area studies, ours as well as any previous critical area studies, and give us clarity. As we do these projects, we're the applicant. We're not the regulator. And so as the applicant, we're really seeking as sort of a next step for our permitting is clarity on that critical area review. As we request that technical review, we'll get a response back from planning that will give us that clarity in regards to the critical areas and any buffers that there might be. Once that clarity is provided to us through that technical document review, we'll then be able to finalize and submit our actual application with our proposed design and any informed design elements that we need to include as it pertains to any critical areas. So it's a new step within the code. I think it's a really, from the applicant standpoint, it's a nice step to have, a good step that gives us that clarity and asks for them to verify again the work that was done by Watershed Company in 2020 and making sure that is accurate and is a clear report and analysis that planning and how planning is going to sort of identify those critical areas and buffers. And then from there, we'll submit final actual submittal of the application and proceed. So timeline for that, the goal for that is, as it has been, permitting process this fall and being able to bid and construct this project in 2024. So we estimate, given the size of the dog park, its proximity, construction is not going to be lengthy as some of our other projects. This is probably an 8-week construction. So we would anticipate this facility opening in 2024. I'd also love to touch on and just remind you, maybe as we go into discussion, dog parks and why this and why the size. And again, I appreciated Steve's Pereira's question and audience comment. You may recall as pre-pandemic, we went through a community exercise of trying to identify and locate a dog park with an idea of what would it look like to have a singular dog park serving all of Issaquah. As I think that exercise unfolded, recognized a potential location and a location at Tibbetts Valley Park that still is an area that's going to be considered for a dog park. It was becoming clearer and clearer that trying to find that 5 to 10 acre singular dog park that's going to serve Issaquah, given the constraints of our land and our community, is really, really hard. You may recall through the pandemic, we had some discussions around, do we, rather than trying to find that and be a one dog park town that provides one large dog park that tries to serve the entire community, perhaps we need to face a reality of what our system is. And perhaps we're better served rather than having one, I'll split the difference, 1 7-acre dog park. Do we consider having a couple of dog parks that are, anywhere from 1 acre to a couple acres? And rather than having a concentrated approach to providing that service, a more dispersed approach and having multiple smaller dog parks through town. As we had that discussion, there was a lot of consensus amongst the park board, a lot of support amongst mayor and council in recognizing really the realities of our system as we try and fit these amenities into our park system, that it was an approach that was supported. So a little bit of context there to Steve's really good question.
Maybe we're at a good point to, if we're going to go into discussion before we do that, to give Corey a chance to provide his input.
All right, thank you. First, I want to make a quick comment on the park plan for classifications. Welcoming Robin, and ask her to do one favor. Don't forget everything you learned before you got here, because your fresh eyes are going to be really important. Now, I'm going to start out by respectfully disagreeing with all of you on this classification thing, because I think the beginning point ought to be looking at what other cities have, what, if the classification for one particular kind of park is 10 acres, it's 10 acres then. Now, I realize that on some of these classifications, there's a little wiggle room on what they are, but it's basically, if it's 1 pound, it's 1 pound. One of the flaws that we've made over the years is we immediately go into the kind of discussion you guys were all having, which is how does our park system fit? And then let's just change the classification to fit with whatever we have. Now, I think what we have is important, but also if 10 acres is the number and what we have is an 8, a 5, and a 4 that we're putting in that classification, then what we have to do is justify the functionality, sort of what Jeff was talking about. Is that 5-acre park functionally a 10-acre, like a 10-acre park, or it's not? Because the thing that we lose out if we're not honest and use classifications that are the same that everybody else uses, then we don't start bringing forward the deficits we have, and we also don't highlight our ultra high points. We have super high points in our system, open space, these linear trails, all of this sort of thing we have a lot of, and we've done a lot of good things as far as preserving land around Issaquah Creek and all of this kind of thing, but we're really short on active recreation, and we're especially short on that moving forward. And so if we're not honest, and if these classifications aren't what they are, but they need to be not what they are, but what they should be. And I think there's some wiggle room, but a pound needs to be a pound. On the dog park, I'm going to disagree a little bit with Jeff's parting comment about the 7 to 10 acres. I think very early on in the discussions 5 years ago, we were pretty well down to 2 acres because we realized there wasn't anything in the city that was going to be 7 to 10 acres, and that 2 acres was kind of the number. And again, this particular location was one we kicked out very quickly because it's so tiny. Now, it is sort of what it is, and so at that point, this is where we are, but we still have to be honest about that. This particular design still bothers me on a couple of levels. Water bothers me because I think in the beginning of the process, same would go if we were looking at Tibbetts Valley Park, we need to be looking at, does this particular piece of land drain? Is there groundwater that comes up? And is there stormwater that comes down? On this particular property, I don't really know. It's in an area of Issaquah where groundwater shouldn't be as an issue. But for example, maybe stormwater is. Maybe stormwater comes off of 2nd Avenue. And so that's important because a dog park needs to be dry. It needs to be dry year round. And when I say dry, it means it needs to drain really well. Mercer Island's dog park has been remodeled. It's a magnificent job. Mercer Island Parks deserves a great shout out because their dog park is dry. In the winter, I've been in there in absolute pouring rain, and it can be pouring rain and they don't have puddles. I mean, there's water around, and the minute it stops raining, whoosh, water's gone. Because one of the things with the dog park, it's really more of a science project than a beauty contest. At least the first part of it, you have to meet the criteria of a science project first. And that's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of any sort of wood chips, because they end up becoming biohazards if they're not kept nice and dry. One of my comments about this design is it's still been, either this or that as far as the surround either being a gravel or some kind of path other than concrete. But looking at the fiber people, the fiber, the people that make the chips, they say you're supposed to avoid contamination of this engineered wood with any kind of sand, gravel, mud, or native soil. And if you look, I looked online at a number of their installations, and they all have either cement curbing or a sidewalk around them. Some parks, the cement curbing is used to plant their fence in, so it's sort of wall to wall. Some it's a separate curb thing, and some it's a walkway. I think this particular park, it ought to be a walkway, because again, when you read about this 5R product, one of the problems is it's hard to walk on. Hard to walk on when it's used in around play structures, but hard to walk on with dog parks. And not so much for normal people, but for senior citizens and people with disabilities. And that's important because if a dog poops into the middle of a park, they need to be able to go out and get it. So having actually a sidewalk that went in a circle around it, which would be similar to what Bellevue's Robbinswood Park has after their remodel, would make a lot of sense. It would make it easier for people to move through. The other thing another easy comment is that, or easy fix, is that front loading all of everything at that bottom entrance creates a situation where when people come in, they all stand right there. And a lot of people will never walk out into the middle if they're walking into mud or they're walking onto the surface that's hard to walk on. And so having that walkway is going to encourage more circulation through the park. Again, if you look at Robbinswood Park in Bellevue, which they remodeled, they made some nice design choices there. If you look diagonal on your design where there's, I think it's a bench and it's where it mentions across right from there, right there. That's about where they have their shelter. And an easy fix for this park would be move the shelter over there and bulge that out slightly. And if you then had a regular walkway, you'd at least get it so people would walk into the park and some people would go to the other end. And so those are the kinds of little things I think would make a significant difference in this design. He's not here, but I'd like to give a shout out to Tim because he's brought up a lot of great comments about dogs, owners, dog parks. And he's an experienced dog owner trainer, and he says he doesn't use dog parks. Now, he and I have gone back and forth, and we actually agree on most things. Now, I'm a very experienced dog park user. Matter of fact, I've been using dog parks in this area for about 35 years, and I go 2 to 3 times a week. That's over 100 times a year. And I've been in the parks. My dogs have been sick, gotten sick in dog parks. They've gotten bit. They've been in fights. I've been knocked over, I've been injured, I've been bit, I've seen all sorts of this stuff happening. And also you hear about all these things because dog parks, I should say, are really people parks, but they're dogs there. So you're talking, most of the time, you're talking to people, so you hear about all this sort of thing. And so some of these design things are the kind of things that the more experience you have, like I wouldn't go to this dog park except very rarely because if it doesn't drain or if I didn't know it drained and if there isn't some circulation, then the risks go up. Dog parks, Tim would say you can't control dog owners and you can't control dogs, which is even the best trained dogs, which is why he's against going into a dog park. I agree with that. But then there's also the design of the dog park, and then you have this opportunity. The better the design, the more circulation you can get, the more separation you can get, the better you're going to be. Because if you don't do that, what happens is if everybody's in a cluster, excited dogs come in. That's when people get knocked down. That's when you have more trouble. Anyway, all in all, I hope that you can add some of these kinds of things. I'd really recommend looking at what these fiber people say their installation guide is, because I think that that should be driving some of these decisions. I think you're close on some of it, but I'd hate to see after all this work that we leave out a cement pathway that could be there and would make a tremendous difference. One last quickie on the water fountains. The clogging, most of the time in a dog park, the water fountains clog because people take the plastic poop bags and clog them because the fountains are designed to drain, so that, again, it's the biohazard thing, and people circumvent that. Anyway, anyway, that's enough. Anyway, thank you, and welcome, Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. So that now concludes our public comment section, and it's open for board discussion. Please.
Questions, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea of having paved around as well for all of the reasons mentioned, and also just to be a more an equitable or friendly park. I also like the idea of moving some of the amenities around the park, so you're not getting the cluster. So I agree with you on both of those components. I'm curious, the size of this park in comparison to what's already there, is it the same size or is it bigger?
It's slightly bigger because it includes some of the slope. So right now, the current dog park fencing, if my mouse is
It
gonna.
also doesn't go all the way to the parking lot.
Kind of goes like where the pathway is almost. And it ends almost maybe like halfway through this small dog area. So it doesn't extend all the way through to the parking.
And can you remind me what the dark brown like circle like?
Yeah, so that is more natural mulch area because it's part of that sloped area.
And it would still be within the fence, so the dogs can.
Still would be within the fence, so the dogs could be around in that area. And the two side sections have existing trees that would be staying.
And there's some questions around drainage. Is there any reason we think that's a high risk in this space from the work that you all have done? I mean, I know there's always drainage is always a risk.
Right.
In Issaquah, but like, is there anything specific to this site that is making it a higher or lower?
As we've seen it, right, it lived a life as a skate park. It's now lived a life as a pop-up dog park for a couple of seasons now. It drains pretty well. We've not seen a massive puddling issue. It's certainly something we're going to want to pay attention to in the final design, and something we'll want to pay attention to. And we think that the technical document report will be really, really informative on some of those drainage questions.
And then question on the little tiny circles, are those most of those like waste station spots?
Yes, so there are two that are, my mouse is like not where it is on my computer, sorry. There are two that are water stations, and then the ones that are here by the fencing are waste stations. And there's also a waste station over by the bench. And I mean, these aren't like exactly where everything is going to go, but the option to have them throughout the park.
My thing is, don't cheap out on like, let's have enough waste stations.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that gets dicey sometimes.
Yeah.
And disperse accordingly. And I would echo Corey, a great comment. I think the idea of dispersing the shelter and shade and other things to encourage, let's encourage not congregating all in one place is really good.
And then lastly, I think there was, some comments about like, oh, we wanted the big park and is this really going to work? And I think what was really, sort of the upside of the fact that we had to sort of move to a different plan. That kind of reminds me of work in design when you have to iterate and try things. And so the fact that we've been able to like iterate and try these different parks and see where the usage are, I think that really, at least for me, helps give me more confidence in this park to say like, okay, we've tried the park in 3 or 4 different areas. We've had good success with this one so far. Making it a little more permanent almost gave it like a kind of a testing ground before we go final. So as long as we're taking the learnings from what's already there, which sounds like you are at the community outreach, that helps give me more confidence.
Yeah, I'll just a couple notes is I took my family to go see the troll recently, and we walked by the dog park in action. And I just stopped and I observed for about 10 minutes just to kind of get an understanding. I don't own dogs, I've never been to a dog park, so I wanted to kind of observe and understand. And I will say, the entire time I was there, there's probably between 3 and 8 dog owners in. And they actually were all congregated at the top where you called out putting a shelter. So I was kind of surprised by that, as everyone was kind of naturally just up in the, I guess you could call it the top. The one observation I would say is the garbage cans were so smelly from waste being put in them. And on a day when there was probably 100 people in line to see the troll, and it was very, very busy, and it was a really cool community thing to see, the first thing you got walking by the troll was just a giant waft of smell. So kind of along those lines of additional receptacles, but even a plan to keep those cleaned on the regular. Just as already noted, the troll is such a cool feature, and hope to have that for a long time. The first thing you're getting greeted with to go see it, or go see the dog parks.
Activating all these amenities and taking care of the amenities and making sure,
It was active. It was cool to see in action.
Can I slip in one very quickie? Thank you. On his comment about the poop receptacles, one thing you really need is nice garbage can receptacles, because people come in with their latte cups and all that and clog up the poop receptacles.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good point, yeah.
Which, to that comment, we've actually talked about that with the amount of visitors that are coming to that area because of the troll. We have talked about additional trash receptacles, not specifically for dogs. So yeah, we are monitoring and watching that, and yeah, making sure that they can be.
I have some comments about dog park planning. So, Corey's comments about some of these other parks that have had remodels and maybe remodels for lessons. I don't know if we've been able to direct our consultants to maybe do some interviews or
Glean the lessons learned.
Glean some lessons learned, larger trash receptacles with lids that close or something like, things like that might help. And, I own dogs. I've gone to dog parks here and in other areas, other states. There will always be, a few problem people and pets or whatever, the things that just don't work out. But by and large, people do seem to self-regulate. Like if it's a very crowded park, they'll go somewhere else or not go, and sort of self-filter that way. But given the community response, in the past years about, desire for dog parks, and then also just from all the people I've heard about with the Tibbetts dog park, and that being kind of tabled for the time being, I think there's a tremendous interest in these. And then also seeing, the people living in the relatively speaking, the newer apartments, and how many of them are dog owners and really needing a place to go. I think we have to proceed, and then, we think there are a lot of opportunities, and Corey's mentioned them. Thank you for us to learn from other people's mistakes and other jurisdictions' mistakes. But I don't see why there's any reason why we can't proceed with this one and make it a successful park.
I think I would just add on that, like with the, dispersed parks, I think to your point on all the different, high occupancy dwellings that are going up, I think that's a more equitable response as well. Have more dispersed parks sort of throughout the community. So another one of those sort of happy accidents from the original plan.
Great feedback.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, sorry,
thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for your patience.
Am I on? Okay. Just a couple things. I read Connie's email about environmental concerns, and I also read the watershed report, which I think addresses some of them. I didn't really compare the two to see if it addresses all of them, but something to consider, because there is, that ditch and water issues there. I assume that permitting will flush that out, but just want to point out that, certainly that needs to be addressed. I'm curious to know about how wood fencing was was selected as the final. My only concern with that is maintenance and longevity, and there may be other alternatives that would be better, but I don't know whether or not cost was maybe the reason why wood fencing was determined to be the best. I'd be curious to know how that arrived at as the best. And I'm all in favor of a dog memorial feature, just to throw that out there as I think that would be a good feature to add, for the people that visit. And I just think that would be a nice amenity for the dog park. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. To your first point, what I was saying earlier about the technical document review being our first step into permitting, it's intended to do that very thing, Brad, is we too, as the applicant, we just want to confirm clarity. Here's what we, heard from our wetland consultant. Here's, some of the other information we're seeing that will allow us to get clarity from planning as to how we need to move forward with, with those reports. To your point about wood fencing, I think a mix, really. I think community was pretty clear. The aesthetic of wood was rated really, really high. Like wood fencing done well, and I'll let Robin speak to this because I only play a landscape architect on TV. I'm not a real one. But yeah, how a wood fence is installed, how you treat the base of it, really goes a long ways to its longevity. This would be a 6x6. This would be a pretty bulky, not bulky, but industrial size dog park that is not going to be easy to sort of tip over. Certainly something we'll need to maintain, but the longevity of these fences relative to cost, it's quite cost effective in many ways. So Robin, please, anything to add?
Yeah, no, we've actually been doing a lot of back and forth with operations team also to see what's helpful for them when it comes to maintenance. They've gotten some great input. Again, it comes back to detailing that fence and detailing all these little connection pieces that are really going to make a difference for the park and make it better and more sustainable long term, or easier to replace, faster to replace, which kind of equates to less expensive.
Yeah, well, we look at sort of the area and proximity of that dog park too, within the trees along the Rainier Trail, sort of a gateway amenity coming from the community center into sort of that forested area of the Rainier Trail, having a fence aesthetic that feels agrarian, right? It feels like it fits sort of into that setting, right?
Are there any,
Thanks for that, Jeff.
lighting considerations? In addition to lighting considerations besides the street lights that are already there on the.
In terms of lighting the dog park? No, not at this time. We're not planning to have a lighted dog park there. I think we want to, again, this would be the city's first permanent dog park, and sort of this dispersed idea that we've talked about. I'll say it again, Tibbetts Valley Park, that is a park that still needs to be, it's a community park that really needs to be reimagined and rethought. And the idea of a dog park being an amenity at Tibbetts Valley Park is still a high priority and will be a part of that conversation going forward. So I think until we really see how our park system is functioning, how our community wants to use it, if there's a real need for those types of evening activities, we would consider it. But at this time, it doesn't feel like there's a high enough need for that. Title 18 also has a dark skies policy in it. So we have to be really, really smart about how we add lighting into our park system or lighting any amenities.
Any other discussion? So this item on the agenda is an action, has an action element. So I think basically, for schedule reasons, park staff is looking to us to, to indicate whether we support pursuing with this or proceeding with it or not. So I don't know if anybody wants to make a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion.
Okay. To support the
Yes.
conceptual design and moving forward. Anyone else?
I second the motion.
Any additional discussion about that? Guess we take a vote. All in favor? Raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to. vote.
Oh, actually, yeah, you don't need to because we got him, but you can if you want. We'll note it.
So room for both alternates. So. Brenda's hand is up.
Brenda's.
Is that a question or a, yeah?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Was that a discussion? I didn't.
No, I thought when you said raise your hand, I just raised my hand. So yeah.
Okay, so that's a vote. I wanted to make sure we didn't overlook a comment. Okay, so.
All right, thank you.
Everybody, yep, and those alternates are acting as regular members for voting because we have 2 regular members absent, so.
Well, and just to clarify, as we proceed, and again, appreciate that affirmative vote. More work ahead, right? So next step for us is the technical document review. That's going to inform a lot in terms of finalizing the design. Obviously, as we go through the permitting process, that too, informs not only timing, but some of the details as well. But thank you. We'll transition to that next step.
And to clarify, sorry, all 3 alternates voted for that, and they all were needed for that. So thank you.
The next item then is the chairperson's report, which is mine, and I don't have too much. We have, I guess there's a continuation of something I brought up last time, which is that we're looking at having a meeting of some sort, maybe even a round table type meeting at a different location where we invite park users, affiliated other groups. So from all perspectives, basically, points of contact for all of our population and users. So, that might be like the president of Little League, but also, the Issaquah Alps and Trails and Fish and various different groups, so that we're really getting a cross section and giving them a chance to reconnect with Park Board, remind them that there are these meetings that are, advertised, but that we really get, just a few people to attend, and maybe see if they start recognizing some of their mutual interests and how they all interact with each other. So that's something we're looking at doing, and we'll continue to. If you have suggestions of people that groups that we should reach out to, please send them to me. Let me know so that I'm not forgetting about someone as we build this list.
I was just thinking, Chris, over the summer, we did some of those sessions, and I can't remember exactly how it was broken out, and I think there was multiple, but I participated in one of them. And there was a couple of representatives from Little League, somebody from a softball league, the new athletic director from Issaquah High School. It was a really cool group and lots of great conversation. And so I think that with that breakout session, there's probably a seed group of people that would love to, they all seemed really excited to be invited to those ad hoc conversations. And I'm sure it would be a great roster for some type of follow-up or ongoing engagement with them.
Yeah, and I think what you just described is exactly the intent, to help these different people network and interact and realize what the parks system offers and how they interact with it, how they can support it. and also advocate for their particular interests and groups. Thank you.
It's a great time. You're right. The focus group discussions sort of kicking off the park plan. We had sort of an athletic group summit and a trails and open space summit, and right, it really led to some really cool conversation. Chris, if as we've talked a little bit about this, it feels like almost a park user summit, right? Where it's like, how do we invite those groups and just let's have a collective conversation about the system.
Right. And I think part of it is too, like closing that loop to an extent or building on those conversations. So it's not like inviting the same people to the table and feeling like they have to rehash the same thing again. But what can we do to make them feel like, okay, we had this focus group. This is what we heard. Now this is the next step and how we're applying that feedback and working it into some plans. So it doesn't just feel like you're having the same conversations again and again.
Something Chris has shared. You've dreamed about doing this for a while now, and happy to work with you and let's make it a reality.
Yeah, and I think another part of it, just to extrapolate, is I had some experience with the Friends of Lake Sammamish State Park, and that's a smaller version of what we are, and it's a part of what we are. And you have these many different users, but really when you invite people to participate, many of them realize that they are not just single issue or single use users. They have kids playing sports, but they like to go walk the trails, or they are bird watchers, or there's many different interests, and I think it's important for people to find that common ground as opposed to isolation breeding adversarial perspectives.
I think as we think about that group too, we spend a lot of time thinking about all of our outdoor amenities, but really making sure we're getting the groups to do the indoor, right? So whether it's the rec basketball coaches or the pickleball people or people who use the fitness center or the pool, I think making sure that we're, checking off those sort of recreation amenities as well would be, if we're kind of creating that list, would be helpful.
Please email me your suggested participants. And this may happen in January or February or something.
Yeah, it feels like first quarter. I know we brainstormed, do we host this at the Pickering Barn and or somewhere big, right? That can be breakout sessions and other just networking opportunities.
Come up with an agenda for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's that. Really
Okay,
good.
so that's all I have. And that, go back to you.
All right, report for me. One, if you don't mind sharing screen, I'm sorry. I will, a couple things that were attached to the agenda. You'll see the work plan, sort of our working park board agenda that we've kept going. We've included that in the agenda if you want to take a look at it. Thank you, Asanthe. He's done a nice job of really documenting the topics we've talked about in the prior months. As you look ahead at that, October and November, we have some pretty big topics coming up. A couple we've already touched on already with the goals and policies conversation coming up both of those months. We're also planned, Dan Hintz, our urban forest supervisor, has been hard at work beginning to frame up the building blocks for an urban forest management plan. I know that there's plans for getting the ad hoc group together before that October meeting. We'd like Dan to come to the October Park Board meeting and give an overview of the approach for the urban forest management plan and what that's going to mean and what that's going to entail. Also kicking off, and you might remember from our conversations early in the first quarter of this year, really wanting to prioritize giving a review and an update, a long needed update of the Heritage Tree Program. So Dan will come in October and touch on both of those. Thank you. I know Steve Pereira had some of those in his audience comment as well. So Steve, if you're still there, October will be a meeting you'll probably be interested in paying attention to or attending. Other item I would just wanted to touch on, I had the chance to provide an update to City Council last Monday, September 18th. last couple of years now, we've done this and just trying to, give an update and some highlights of our busy work plan within the department. I included that in the agenda as a chance for you to take a look at. I can sort of cursory go through these slides. I don't intend to dive deep into the details unless you want to, or I really open up for questions. But I really want to say, and it was a great opportunity to share with council and community. It really is an honor to represent and work with such a diverse group of professionals in this department. We get a lot of work done, and it's done through some really talented, really service-minded staff. And they do great work. And so this was a chance to just walk through, our department is really comprised of 5 key teams, 5 key work groups: recreation, human services, arts, park planning and development, and park operations are really our 5 key divisions. And so doing a quick walk through all 5 of those within the recreation group, as you know, they oversee both the community center and the senior center, as well as the pool, and all of our functions at the Pickering Barn. An amazing summer that team put together. 880 campers over 9 weeks of our base summer camps. Add on to that another 1,200 campers through a wide variety of sports camps that we offer, many of those through partnered agencies. Callie is our new recreation coordinator. She's come on board as our adaptive recreation coordinator. So adaptive recreation is back in abundance with trips and programs, as well as Special Olympics teams. Concerts on the Green were a huge, well-attended event. We had to cancel the 8th due to rain, but even with the 7, we easily had over 8,000 attendees, easily averaging over 1,000 attendees for each of those weeks. The senior center too, very busy time, not only with the indoor programming and providing lunch 5 days a week, but a great portfolio of trips and hikes that seniors are able to get out and enjoy. Not to be outdone, our pool, I know a number of you go to the pool regularly. That is a popular place. It is a hopping place, both in terms of community use. Our lessons program, summer session alone, had almost 1,000 participants in it. The farmers market and all the activities, both our rentals at the Pickering Barn, but the farmers market, a few fun data points to share with council and you all. We average 73 vendors each Saturday, over 3,500 shoppers each Saturday. Kelly Diane, who's in the upper left there with the nice shades, has just done an amazing job of managing the market. To think that we surpassed our year-to-date sales record on August 31st was pretty impressive at 1.4 million. So that doesn't even include any of our summer or our fall sales. An amazing team of volunteers and staff that help make that market happen. If you haven't been this summer, this next Saturday, September 30th, is the last market day till we close down for the season, but a great season and all. And Kelly Diane is a bit of a star and recognized by 425 magazine as one of the 40 under 40 in the hospitality category. As I told council, there's not a lot of people that can rock pink sunglasses, but Kelly Diane can. She owns it. Transitioning to arts, Amy Dukes and our arts manager and her work with the Arts Commission. Very successful Chalk Art Festival, over 450 participants. If you've ever seen that or wondered why the Rainier Trail in front of the community center heading down to City Hall South has all those colors for the last weeks of summer, that's remnants from the Chalk Art Festival. Shakespeare in the Park was a huge hit. Wooden O is the theater group out of Seattle that does those. They did The Tempest this year. A little over 300 people attended that. Our Arts Commission does a lot of grant programs. We've done a little twist in how we're providing grants and really wanted to emphasize grants for arts in schools and Issaquah-based schools. And then last but certainly not least, we welcomed Jacob Two Trees to Issaquah on September 1st. Jacob was unveiled down by the Rainier Trail. If you haven't had a chance to go meet Jacob, please do. It's been a real successful art installation, and thank you, Brad, for your words. I think what has been important to Amy and important to really our thoughts about arts and how arts tells our story in the parks. We want to do art in a way that is thoughtful and speaks to who we are as Issaquah. A Danish artist, you wouldn't think necessarily speaks to Issaquah, but his goals for sustainability, for using recycled materials, was a real priority for us. That Thomas worked closely with the Snoqualmie tribe, which he did, which was just great to see that cultural collaboration come together. The Human Services team, not something we talk about a lot here with the Parks Board, but they're such a key part of what we do as a department. The Human Services Commission obviously oversees a lot of this work. If you didn't know, we opened up this summer Issaquah's first shelter, serving those that are homeless. This is not a typical traditional congregate shelter, but really more of a what we're calling an emergency housing model. We've rented 12 rooms at Motel 6 for the full year and are utilizing those rooms to have customers come and be housed under a very focused agreement that those individuals are working on 8 really key areas, and that housing model is really helping transition that individual from homelessness to permanent housing. And so we really are excited about launching that and seeing how outcomes can really begin to, or we can really begin to create some positive outcomes with individuals who are taking part in that program. A really impressive team of professionals in our Human Services team. We also like to take advantage, the last bullet there you see, the Human Services team hosted a community resource fair, really focused on kids, while we did the Chalk Art Festival. So how can we take some of our events and piggyback and collaborate in a way and really meeting our residents in some fun new ways. Park Ops team has been really busy this spring and summer, as they always are. Rick Still, our Park Operations Manager, who came on board a few years ago, as you recall, we've really been able to organize our Park Operations team in a very new way, and we're really beginning to see some terrific outcomes to that organization and structure. Some fun facts about the yard that we maintain for you residents. It's about 52 acres of turf that we mow. If you add up all of our landscaping beds that we weed and plant and maintain, it's about 7 acres of landscaping beds alone. This summer alone, 12,000 bags of trash were collected, 100,000 doggy bags were provided, and 37 stations throughout our full system. So those are, doggy bag stations in our parks and along our trails. Picnic shelters remain immensely popular here in Issaquah, as we're looking at adding a few others through some of our park projects. Over 240 shelter rentals that we supported through the summer months. I mentioned earlier Dan and his work with the Urban Forest Management Plan kicking off this summer. Really excited to see those outcomes. Through our partnered work, through our contracted work, through our own work, over 22,000 trees have been planted in our city parks and open space this year to date. So again, really looking at our urban forest understanding, even as we saw the one tree fall here, and as Corey and I were walking in, right? It's that the realization that our park system is active. It's living, breathing, dynamic, constantly changing. And so really Succession planting with trees, succession planting with trees is really, really important. Green Issaquah is beginning to really blossom in its productivity. We have a volunteer coordinator that's been brought on board this year. So over 40 events have been hosted, representing a little over 2,300 hours of volunteer work. So some great output there. Within our park projects, a lot of the areas that we talk about, that work has continued throughout the summer. Welcome on board, Robin, as Robin's becoming familiar with all of these, right? But again, thank you to Santi and Rick and certainly some added work for myself. Work on Pedestrian Park Senior Center continues. We'll hopefully have a more focused update at our October Park Board meeting as we're really getting close to submitting design for that. Hillside Park permitting has been underway. We didn't host, Community Planning and Development hosted a neighborhood environmental meeting as part of the permit process. We hope to be getting our permit responses and actions back from Community Planning and Development in the next month or two. This is a project too. We hope to be out to bid this winter and plan to be under construction and complete in 2024. The others, two topics we touched on in a pretty big way tonight. And lastly, again, just a kudos to the team. You know, we do a lot of things, but we talk a lot about this to our staff and to the team in the department. We have two core jobs, and that's stewarding places and investing in people. Is really the two things that we do in this department and for this community, and an amazing staff to work with. So there's a little deeper dive than maybe I was planning to. Sorry, I started soapboxing, so forgive me.
It's a lot of good
Great
stuff.
team.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. That was awesome.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other business or announcements to bring up?
I just make a public comment for myself, but I know Brad said it earlier, but that Jacob 2 trees art installation, I know there was concerns about placement on the trail, concerns about mitigation of some of the plants, concerned about foot traffic coming from the apartments to hit the trail to go on salmon days, those types of things that were heard at our tour in school. But like I said, I've already been there. I took my family. There was a huge line of people waiting to take pictures. It was a fantastic display of community. You had the trail was serving people on bicycles. It was serving people pulling their children in wagons. It was serving people in wheelchairs. It was serving people walking their dogs to the art exhibit, then to go to the dog park. So just from the planning on that, the execution, and how it finally turned out, it's a fantastic piece. It's a fantastic installation. It's a fantastic thing for our community. So great job around and all the feedback that was taken and how that's set up, because just watching people hand over their phones and take pictures with other people, and it was really just the community was vibrant and alive for that one thing. And so thanks to everyone and the city and everyone that made that happen. It's a really cool thing.
Appreciate that, Ryan. Yeah, it's a really cool thing for Issaquah, and it'll be interesting to see some of the data points from the downtown businesses, but the energy along the Rainier Trail and even through Old Town, it's noticeable in terms of just sort of visitation and what that's meant. And as we worked with the artist, it was a really important priority that it's going to be in Issaquah. How can we have an installation like this support Issaquah and support Issaquah businesses? Another important point, and we're continuing to have conversation with community planning and development. It has been our commitment from the get-go, and given how popular it is, to make sure that art installation has no negative environmental impact and is making a positive environmental impact. And so any and all, buffer mitigation's already been done. We will certainly commit to any and all buffer mitigation to again make sure that is a a positive many ways around, but a positive for the community as well as the environment. It's cool.
And I just added something to that. So I had the opportunity to volunteer to,
Help
build.
them help build,
help them.
Jacob,
I
yeah.
did not realize that one of the requirements was that you needed to have some carpentry skills. So, but I did show up and I saw what was required of me. I tried. I actually helped to build the bench that the other volunteers sit down to take breaks during lunch. So I was really proud of myself. But I had the opportunity to meet a resident that she drove all the way from Seattle and one from Bellevue. And it was so neat to, they were blown away. And I had the opportunity just to kind of push for our city parks and recs. And they were very impressed. Wow, Issaquah, So that was very neat.
Great to hear. Great to hear. Yeah.
Anybody have anything else? All right, with that, 3 minutes to spare.
Well done, Chris. Well done, Chris.
Meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be October 23rd, which is a Monday, right?
Yes, we're back to Monday.
Back to
Back to Monday, and here, correct? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Very good. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, dang it.